When a man has avoidant tendencies, the world often sees him as cold, closed off, or emotionally unavailable. But those labels are shallow. They miss what's really happening underneath. Because when a man with avoidant wiring allows himself to become physically vulnerable, when he opens his body to touch, closeness, and deep intimacy, it's never just sex. It's a revolution inside his nervous system. It's a moment when biology, emotion, memory, and fear all collide. And when love is real, when love is genuine, you will see it in 5 specific ways during lovemaking. Things he doesn't even realize he's doing. But they are the clearest indicators that his emotional walls are not just falling. They're being shattered. When a man with avoidant attachment tendencies allows himself to remain present during lovemaking, something far more profound than sex is occurring. It's the collision of 2 opposing forces inside his nervous system, the primal desire for connection and the deeply ingrained fear of emotional vulnerability. And when he does not rush, when he does not check out, when he does not treat the moment like a transaction, but instead stays grounded, soft, and aware, you are witnessing a miracle in real time, because this is a man who has trained his biology to protect itself through distance, through control, through emotional walls that were built not out of malice, but out of pure survival. And now, in the most raw and exposed state possible, he's overriding that programming in order to give you something he's denied himself for years. True presence. This presence is not a technique, not a strategy, not a role he plays to impress or seduce. It is an internal transformation where he stops using his body as armor and begins using it as a bridge, a point of contact, not just for physical pleasure, but for emotional truth. And the weight of that shift is enormous, because for the avoidant man, being present is not his baseline. It's a place he has to fight to stay inside, a place his nervous system often interprets as dangerous, unstable, and deeply unfamiliar, and yet, in your arms, he is choosing to stay inside it anyway. He is choosing to feel what he usually numbs, to stay when he usually escapes, to soften when every cell in his body has been trained to tense. His breath is different now. It syncs with yours not out of conscious effort, but because his parasympathetic nervous system is finally beginning to activate, signaling to his brain that he is safe, that he can lower his defenses, that he can let go of hypervigilance. And this may be the first time in his adult life that he has felt this. And you might think this is simple, but it is anything but, because what you don't see are the decades of emotional shutdown behind this moment. The childhood wiring that told him love means enmeshment, that closeness equals danger, that to let someone in means to lose control. And now, without saying a word, he is letting you in, not because it feels easy, but because he trusts you enough to let it feel hard. This is not a man simply making love. This is a man facing his biological reflexes and refusing to let them dictate his future. And in the stillness of his gaze, in the steadiness of his touch, in the silence between moans and words, you are seeing him unlearn fear in real time. And the science behind this is clear. When an avoidant man becomes present, his brain begins to release oxytocin, the bonding chemical, and this is often overwhelming for him because oxytocin is the very neurochemical his system has spent a lifetime avoiding, and now it floods his body like truth, like revelation, like surrender, and in that flood is the real messaging: I am here, I am with you, I am not escaping. This moment is not about technique, it's about trust, and trust for the avoidant man is the hardest thing to give. Because trust requires a lowering of the guard, a dismantling of the very walls that once kept him emotionally alive, and the risk of being fully present is massive, because presence means he has no script, no protection, no exit plan, and still he stays, and that staying is more intimate than any position, more vulnerable than any whisper, more exposed than any naked body, because in that presence is a kind of love that bypasses language, a kind of commitment that doesn't require promises, because his biology is doing the talking now, and what it's saying is louder than any "I love you" could ever be. And what makes this even more powerful is that he's not doing this for validation. He's not doing it because he's been taught to behave this way. He's doing it because your energy, your consistency, your emotional safety has allowed him to lower the shields for the first time. And when you feel his body stay close, when you feel his rhythm slow down, when you feel his breathing deepen, you are witnessing the nervous system of a man choosing love over protection, choosing connection over survival, choosing now over history. In the best red lights, then you'll notice that in this state of presence, he doesn't dominate the moment. He merges with it, not in a way that loses himself, but in a way that finally allows him to be fully known, without fear. And that means everything, because for the avoidant man, love has always been a battlefield between who he wants to be and what he was taught he must be to avoid pain. And now, for once, he doesn't have to choose between desire and dignity. He can bring all of himself without apology, without games, without the haunting need to run. And this is why presence during lovemaking from an avoidant man is so rare and so precious. It's not about performance, it's about safety. It's about his nervous system finally deciding that your touch is not a threat, that your closeness is not a trap, that your love is not a weapon. And in that moment, he is not just giving you his body, he is giving you his trust, which for him is the most sacred and terrifying thing he can offer. This presence is not passive. It is active surrender. It is fierce stillness. It is him holding himself inside a storm that would usually send him running. And in staying, he is rewriting his entire story. He is telling himself, maybe for the first time, that he can love and be loved without disappearing, without failing, without being consumed. And that belief, that new neurological possibility, only exists in this kind of space, in the quiet, in the closeness, in the rhythm of two bodies choosing to breathe together instead of apart. So when you see him there, not just in your bed, in your eyes, not just moving but feeling, not just touching but staying, know that what you're witnessing is a man falling into his own heart for the first time, not because he wants to impress you, but because you've given him permission to finally stop impressing anyone, stop performing, to stop pretending that he doesn't want to be held, seen, known, understood, and safe. And in that moment, he is not just making love, he is discovering love, maybe for the very first time. When a man with avoidant tendencies stays after intimacy, when he doesn't disappear into silence, distraction, or sudden emotional shutdown, but instead remains fully there, soft, breathing, present. It's not just a gesture of love, it's a full-blown nervous system breakthrough, and most people will never realize what it costs him to stay in that moment. Because for someone with avoidant wiring, closeness after vulnerability is often more terrifying than the vulnerability itself. And yet if he stays, if he lets his body remain near yours, if he allows his skin to stay in contact with yours, it means his biology has shifted from threat to safety. And this shift is not a performance. It's a deep recalibration of a man who is learning how to stay emotionally even after the high fades, after the climax ends, after his defenses naturally start to rise again. Because you need to understand that for avoidance, post-intimacy is often the most triggering part of the experience. It's where their instincts to pull back come alive, where the fear of being overwhelmed or smothered kicks in, where old patterns from childhood echo in their chest and scream for solitude, and when he resists that urge to retreat, when he doesn't reach for his phone, or get up to leave, or emotionally check out, he is not just giving you affection, he is choosing growth over fear. He is choosing you over his past. He is choosing to stay in a place his nervous system once labeled as unsafe. And that is not just rare, it is holy. This isn't about cuddling. This isn't about physical nearness alone. This is about his capacity to remain emotionally engaged in a moment that would usually trigger shutdown, detachment, or withdrawal. And when he wraps his arm around you, when he buries his face in your neck, when he breathes in your presence and doesn't flinch from the weight of intimacy, you're seeing a man override years of protective wiring that told him closeness equals danger, that told him intimacy must always be followed by escape. And what you're witnessing is not softness. It is strength. It is the purest expression of nervous system regulation, of healing in motion, because in that moment, his body is learning that staying doesn't mean losing control, that being held doesn't mean being consumed, that silence after sex can be safe instead of suffocating. And these are lessons his mind alone could never teach him. They must be learned through experience, through repetition, through moments where he chooses to stay, even as every cell in his body tells him to run. And it's not what he says, it's what he doesn't do that speaks loudest, because the avoidant man often struggles to verbalize emotion, to articulate his feelings, to put words to what love feels like in his chest. But his post-intimacy presence says everything he can't. It tells you that your body isn't just a place to escape loneliness. It tells you that your heart isn't just a temporary refuge. At best, red light. It tells you that being near you doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like peace. And that peace is not a product of your effort to fix him or change him. What's the natural result of him beginning to trust that your love is not conditional, that your touch won't trap him, that your presence won't drown him, and in that trust, His biology relaxes, his cortisol levels drop, his heart rate slows, his breathing evens out, and for the first time in a long time, he feels safe. Not just with you, but with himself, with his own emotions, with his own capacity to feel without being devoured. And what most people don't understand is that staying after sex is not about being nice or polite or romantic. It is about whether or not his nervous system has reached the point where it no longer views closeness as a threat, where it no longer needs to shut down to survive. And so when you feel him linger, when his hand traces your skin slowly, when he kisses your forehead without urgency, when he holds you without needing to say a word, what you're experiencing is not just intimacy, it's a biological miracle. It's emotional courage at the deepest level, because this is a man who has fought closeness his whole life, who has trained himself to find safety in solitude, who has made avoidance his emotional home, and now, for the first time, he's building a new home. With you in your arms, in the quiet aftermath of vulnerability, in the silence where his presence speaks louder than anything he could ever say. This is how you know it's real. Not because he told you how much he cares, not because he performed affection, not because he repeated the right lines, but because he stayed. And staying is the most honest thing an avoidant man can do, because it goes against his very instinct, because it forces him to sit with the weight of his own feelings, because it requires him to trust something deeper than logic, deeper than performance, deeper than survival, and that something is love, raw, terrifying, unfamiliar love that doesn't demand escape, that doesn't activate shame, that doesn't make him feel like he's losing himself by giving himself. And the longer he stays, the more his nervous system rewires itself in your presence, and that rewiring is not just for the moment, it's for life, because the body remembers what safety feels like. And if he learns that you are safe, that intimacy is not annihilation, then you are no longer just a partner. You are his emotional revolution. The moment he began to believe he could love without disappearing. And that's why his stillness after sex is louder than any grand gesture. Because in that stillness is everything he's ever feared, everything he's ever longed for, everything he's never dared to feel until now. And when you hold him in that space, without rushing, without questioning, without needing more than what's already there, you become the mirror that reflects back to him the truth that he is not broken, not damaged, not incapable of staying. You become the proof that he is allowed to love and be loved without needing to vanish. And that changes everything, not just for you, but for him. Because it gives him a memory of safety, a new reference point his body will crave the next time he wants to run. And with each repetition, his nervous system learns to trust not only you, but himself. And that trust is how love becomes sustainable for the avoidant heart, not through force, not through fixing, but through quiet moments of consistent presence where staying becomes